Hi there, and a very warm welcome to this webinar, 4 Steps to Living Your Purpose at Midlife. My name's Lizzie Page. I'm a life transformation coach to women at midlife who just aren't prepared to stay stuck any longer. And what I've got for you today in this webinar is 4 steps to show you how to follow your direction and purpose without feeling guilty about letting everyone else down. To stop putting yourself last on the list, and how to feel that sense of fulfillment that you've always craved so that you can live a life true to yourself. And if you're thinking, but the trouble is I don't even know what my direction is, I don't know which direction to go in or what my purpose is, then that's okay too, because there's something here that I think will help you to see that that isn't something that needs to keep you stuck. So at midlife, it's so common to feel restless and dissatisfied with the status quo. Lots of women I talk to think that they're the only ones feeling this, but it's quite natural because it's time for something new before it's too late. We're at that stage of life where up till now it's made sense to focus on others, but often it doesn't anymore, and we still have several decades of life to enjoy. So let's choose to spend them well, because we don't want to look back on life and feel I was never really true to myself. So why should you stay for this web class? Well, this is for you if you're feeling restless and dissatisfied. Maybe you've got an empty nest, maybe you're single, maybe you're feeling lonely or bored or worn out, or just things are shifting inside of you and you desperately want to find a new direction for your life, but you don't really know what it could be. And perhaps you dream of making a contribution to the world and feeling a sense of fulfillment that's lacking at the moment. Maybe you feel stuck in a life of meeting others' needs while your needs are ignored. Or maybe you feel guilty when you consider focusing on you, and you just don't know how you can make those changes in your life. So in this webinar, I'm going to show you how you can get started today. So the real problem, whatever it seems like, the real problem is that you have no idea what you've really got going for you. We all get stuck, unable to see what's beyond what we currently think is possible. We see this imagined future and we don't really like the look of it, and we think that's all there is, but what we can see is just such a tiny part of what's possible. And so what I'm hoping to do today is help you to expand your vision. So because of this, you think that things can't change the way that you'd like them to, but they can, and they can change in all sorts of ways that are better than you've probably ever imagined. So as a result of what I'm going to show you today, you can get in touch with what you really want for the next stage of your life. And you will know how to start achieving a life of fulfillment and joy. And you'll no longer be held hostage by others' expectations. And you'll know how to escape the issues that are keeping you limited and stuck, so that you can start creating a life that you can get excited about. So this webinar is for you if you secretly know that you hold the keys to your own transformation and the transformation of your life, and you're ready to get started. You don't want to wait any longer. So a little bit more about me. I've been running my own business now for several years. I run a program for women at midlife called Permission to Be You, and it has various different elements to it, and I'll say a bit more about that later on. But I now work flexible hours and I have plenty of time for doing what I love and being with my family. I run events in the UK and abroad, and I'm master of my own destiny. I decide what I want to do next, and I'm less stressed and have more fun than I ever have. But it hasn't always been like that, because 5 years ago I was a primary school teacher and school leader, and I was just stuck in this job that no longer fulfilled me. I used to love teaching, but I'd had enough. It was time to move on, but I had no idea what else I could do. It seemed that teaching was all I knew. And I was talking to a couple of teachers the other day who said the same thing. This, well, this is all I've ever done. How can I possibly do anything different? And I think a lot of us feel that, whatever it is that we're doing. But I was becoming really miserable. There were all these tedious admin tasks that just seemed pointless to me. I just mentally had moved on from all of that. So I was becoming fractious and grumpy with the children. It just wasn't working for me any longer. So really, I thought I had two choices. I could continue to struggle and moan my way towards retirement, which is really what I felt I was doing, or I could figure out another way. And I decided to figure something out. So I started a transition business to work my way out of teaching, and I established a niche as a freelance teacher, running a workshop in all sorts of different schools. And that was great, and that business is still growing and flourishing. And most significantly, I also got support with my mindset, and I started to see myself differently and get this sense of possibility. And so then I took the plunge and invested in myself and trained as a coach. And it was during that I began to realize that I was the creator of my own opportunities. I felt this new excitement and enthusiasm for life, and just felt that I was so much more on board with my life than when I felt that my life was just chugging along and I was just doing what kind of was in front of me rather than what I was creating and what I loved. So suddenly it began to click for me that this journey that I've taken is one that so many people are searching for but don't know how to start, like those teachers I was talking to the other day. And when I was moving out of teaching, so many people said to me, "Oh, you're so brave. I wish I could do something like that." But then they came up with a list of excuses why it just wouldn't work for them. But that's just not true. It's those excuses that we throw in our way are habits of thinking, and you don't have to be brave to do this. It's about understanding how our experience works and that we are creators of our own destiny and of our own experience. So for the past 5 years, I've been creating the life that I love. I take plenty of time to exercise and enjoy the outdoors. I took a group of women to Nepal on a trekking retreat. I have time to visit my daughter at university and watch her shows and musicals. I have more time and headspace to help with local organisations and community groups. And I just want to show you how to do the same, whatever that looks like for you, and create a life that you love. So looking back, I can see that there are kind of 4 key things that I realised that enabled me to start creating this life that was really fulfilling for me. And I want to show you those things today. So the first step is to understand that you're not a victim of circumstance, that you create your own experience and you can take control of that. Because if you don't do that, while you feel that you're a helpless victim of circumstance, you just have this sense of helplessness and immobility and stuckness. And all you can do is wait for circumstances to change. Because if it's the circumstances that are causing your feelings, then the circumstances need to be different, and therefore you remain stuck. But it doesn't actually work that way. Because although it often looks as if you can only behave one way given your circumstances, you can actually find plenty of examples of others behaving differently given those same circumstances. It's our thinking that dictates how we feel, not our circumstances. And once you know that, then you can start to shift from limitation mode into possibility mode. And I explore this in a lot more depth in my program, Taking Steps to Live Your Purpose, and in the coaching I do one-to-one with my clients, because this seeing that we actually have such an enormous range of possibilities and we're not limited by what we can currently see as possible, is an enormous shift that makes a huge difference to our lives. Because once we're into that possibility mode, we start to access inner resources, creative solutions, and this kind of receptive mindset that just opens up our life and allows so much more opportunity and for us to create so much more in our lives. So an example of this is a client I work with, who I'm going to call Jan, and she'd had mental health problems all her life, and she knew the mental health system inside out. But she really had this sense that she wanted to create something new in her life. But every time I talked to her about this kind of range of possibilities and how there was more that she could do than she thought, she'd say, "Oh no, you don't understand, I'm this, that and the other, and my brain is different and I need all this support." In other words, it's the circumstances that make it impossible for me to be any different. And I just knew that wasn't true. And when I hear people arguing for their own limitation, it just inspires me in the work that I do, because what I do is point my clients back relentlessly to the fact that it is not impossible for life to be different. So now Jan is in a job that she loves. She's removed herself from mental health services altogether. She's experiencing freedom and more happiness than she has for many, many years. And it was there just came a kind of turning point where she realized that she was kind of holding all this in place with her limited thinking about herself. And when she realized that that was what it was, and that it wasn't those circumstances that were the problem, it was her thinking about the circumstances, everything started to shift. So step 2 is to identify the stories that you repeatedly tell yourself and see them for what they are. Stories. Stories are not real. But while you think that stories are real, you act as if they're real. And as a result, you just keep repeating the same behavior. Things look real and we just keep responding in the same way, and we're really stuck in these behaviors that we don't want anymore. But our version of the world is entirely our own. We can't see the world as it literally is. We can only see our interpretation of it based on experience and things we've been told. And so we've made up a whole range of stories about ourselves, about the world, about other people. And some of these are not unhelpful. Some are closer to reality and work better for us than others. But some are very limiting. And if you start to notice your stories and that other people have alternatives to those kind of stories, you can start to consider what alternatives there are to your stories that might serve you better. But even before that, just realizing that what looks very real to you, what looks like it's absolute reality, is not, in fact. It's a version that you've created. And again, by feeling that this story is the only way, this is limiting us and narrowing down our options. And the stories that we have are multi-layered, and they link into other people's stories. And of course, you're playing a role in other people's stories as well. But the more that you can start to spot them quickly, you can decide whether to act on them or not. And you'll find yourself discovering new stories and new ways of looking at the same situation. It's not that we're looking to get rid of stories. That's impossible. We can only see the world as our interpretation of it. But when we know that that's not reality, then it can shift and change. We're flexible. We're not stuck. And that's what makes all the difference. So let me tell you about a client of mine called Jenny, who had a story. My partner's a narcissist. He always has to have everything his own way. And she portrayed him as entirely selfish and uncaring. He always chose what they watched on TV. He was the one that decided what they'd do each day. He woke her in the night to rub his aching back. His family always took priority over hers. and gave her such a hard time about her driving that she'd sold her car. But when she started to realise that actually her own behaviour had encouraged or perhaps even caused some of his habits, she very quickly turned things around. The fact that she thought he was a narcissist made her behave in certain ways, which kind of reinforced that story. And it was just amazing to see that within a month, she was her own person again. She was living her own life, doing her own thing. Her partner was perfectly happy. And in fact, he was more relaxed and at ease with her because she was more relaxed and at ease with herself, because she wasn't believing all this stuff that she'd made up in her own head. So let's have a look at step 3. Identify others' expectations and desires for you and hand them back, leaving room for your own wishes and desires to emerge. So without doing this, we'll be constantly looking out to see what other people expect. And there are a lot of other people out there expecting all sorts of different things. And when we then don't meet others' expectations as we perceive them, then we feel really bad and uncomfortable and inadequate or guilty or whatever it is. And so we make increasingly exhausting attempts to avoid those bad feelings by trying to meet everybody's expectations. And as you can see, this is just an absolutely exhausting and totally unproductive way to live our lives, because quite possibly we've made up what these other people's expectations are in the first place. And even if other people are expecting certain things of us, we are not responsible for the happiness of others. We actually cannot make other people happy or unhappy. It seems as if we can, and they think we can, but it's actually just not true, because our feelings come from thought, from what we're thinking, and other people's feelings come from thought. So it's their interpretation of what we do that actually creates their sense of happiness or unhappiness. We can actually have more of an impact in the world by living a fulfilled and vibrant life ourselves, rather than scrabbling around, constantly trying to meet everybody else's needs. So an example of this is maybe when I was stuck doing this teaching job that I just had enough of, really. I was earning enough for day to day, and I was meeting family expectations as I saw them. And it just seemed as if that was my role in life, and the expectations that I perceived of doing the right thing and being careful and sensible, and this is what I was trained for, so this is what I ought to do, just seemed to make sense. And leaving to set up my own business kind of seemed to go against what was expected of me. But I began to realize that actually these expectations that I'd kind of pinned out there on other people and, on the world just weren't necessarily true, and that I had much more freedom to live my life as I wanted to live it than I had previously thought. So now I just feel I'm living this much more vibrant life with holidays and trips like never before, and more adventures and possibilities. So step 4, the final step, is about taking action. Start taking action, even if you don't feel ready, and you don't know exactly where you're heading, and it's a bit scary, because this is something that so often keeps people stuck, is this sense of not feeling ready and not really knowing where they're heading and feeling a bit scared. But you'll never feel completely ready. You're here listening to this because actually you are ready, whether you feel it or not. If you wait to have everything kind of 100% secure, confirmed, your direction totally clear, your finances sorted, everybody else's expectations in order, all of that, the chances are you will never get started. But life is a journey, and we're creating it as we go along. It's not that there's somewhere to get to before we can begin. It's an adventure, and we can stumble across the next step once we get moving. But when we're stuck and immobile, we can't stumble across anything. There's this misunderstanding that you need to be brave that I talked about earlier to step out into something new. But you don't need to be brave, you just need to understand how life works. The next thing emerges as you move forward. If you look back over life, you can see that this is the pattern of how life works. It's not a straight line from the beginning of our career to where we are now. Things emerge and opportunities come up and we experience setbacks and we just keep taking the next step. And that's what we need to do now. I wasn't ready. It wasn't like I had everything in place. And I didn't know that it would work out when I started my business. And of course, my business and my life are still evolving. Things aren't perfect. They're not in some sort of wonderful state, how they're going to stay forever. They never will be perfect. That's the whole point. It's a journey that we're on. So let's have a recap on those 4 steps. So the first is to understand that you're not a victim of circumstance, that you create your own experience and you can take control. Step 2 is to identify the stories that you repeatedly tell yourself that are getting in your way and are really unhelpful, and replace them with new ones, or just see them for what they are. Step 3 is to identify others' expectations and desires for you and hand them back, leaving room for your own wishes and desires to quickly emerge. And step 4 is to start taking action. Even if you don't feel ready, you don't know exactly where you're heading, and it's a bit scary. So that's how I created a new way of living at midlife. And you can too. I really encourage you to step out and start to make those changes. So having listened to how that's worked for me and how I and others have done it, I expect you've realised that what I'm saying can help you. And maybe you're wondering how you can implement those steps for yourself. So if you'd like some help in putting those steps into action, then I've got a couple of suggestions for you. You can take part in my online course, which is part of Permission to Be You, Taking Steps to Live Your Purpose at Midlife. And this is a really good way to discover your direction and your purpose, to start taking action, to realise that you are the creator of your life and start to experience that for yourself. If you're really determined to make those changes and you're ready for a deep dive into what's keeping you stuck and exploring how to move past those habits and ways of behaving that have constantly kept you stuck, then why not join me for some personal one-to-one coaching? I love doing this kind of work with women because it just enables us to really home straight in on what it is that's getting in your way and start to unpick that. And I notice changes very often immediately as people start to see for themselves where their own thinking and their own ways of seeing the world are getting in their way and keeping them stuck. So if you would like to explore that further, you can access my diary via the button below or the link and book a 45-minute discovery call with me where we can discuss what's going on for you and how I might be able to help and see if we're a good fit for each other. So go ahead and book yourself a slot and we can get to know each other a little bit more. I would love to help you to get started so you can get up every morning with enthusiasm. So if you're looking for some new inspiration in your life, then I really encourage you to start taking action. Because of course, the final alternative is to do nothing and just to notch this up as, oh, another useful video I saw. But you know, when you feel this inspiration, if you've heard something here that's really spoken to you, I encourage you to take that next step, to start taking action, because it's the absence of that action taking that just keeps us stuck again and again. Oh, that was interesting, but actually I haven't done anything about it. So please join me in one of those options above. So this is something that can be really transformational for you, because it has been for so many other women that I've worked with. Please don't stay stuck any longer. It just isn't necessary. You have everything you need to get moving on an inspiring and exciting life for these next decades. So if you've tried getting unstuck before, but you just find you fall back into old habits and ways of thinking, or you've reached that point where you just know something needs to change, and you're willing to hear something new and consider a different approach from what you've tried before, and you're committed to making yourself the priority in your life, not at some point in the future, but now, before it's too late, then I would love to work with you. I love seeing the results that people achieve, despite all the stories they've told themselves to the contrary. So how would it be if in 3 months' time you were free from doubt about what direction to head in, and you're engaged in something new that's fun and fulfilling with a real sense of purpose, and that you could have that sense of knowing that you have everything you need, and so feel confident to be pursuing your dreams? Maybe you'd love to be no longer hearing that voice of self-criticism that seems to get in your way every time you get started, or be free from other people's expectations and pursuing what you want from life without guilty feelings. And maybe you'd love to see your relationships improve as you start to blossom into who you really are. This is something that I see in so many people I work with, that without even thinking about it, the relationships with others in their lives just shift and change and become so much more enjoyable and fulfilling. So what if you could feel like the creator of your life rather than the helpless victim? I offer this program and this coaching because I've seen that it helps the women I work with achieve all those things and more, often with immediate results. And I would love for you to be one of those people. So you can get started in those 2 ways that I've mentioned. You can apply to join the online program at lizziepaige.com/taking steps, and there's a button below to find out more about that too. Or you can apply for one-to-one coaching with me at lizziepaige.com/apply. And again, there's a button there where you can access my diary and book for yourself a 45-minute discovery call where we can get to know each other a bit and work out whether we're a good fit to work together and explore what it is that's keeping you stuck. And I can give you some pointers in how to start moving and taking action. So I really hope that you will take me up on one of these offers and get out of that stuck zone and start to see and realize the possibility that lies before you for this next stage of your life.